Hi, I'm Will Hansen with Cantology. In this video, I'm going to show you why you should consider canting your ski boots. There's a lot of confusion and misinformation out there. I'm going to clear that up and explain canting in a way you've never seen before. And by the end of this video, you may find an easy way to have a breakthrough in your skiing. Let's get started. In the context of skiing, cant is a wedge positioned somewhere between the sole of your foot and the top surface of your ski. There are several ways to do canting. We'll do another video to explain the various options. I'm going to show you how we cant ski boots. And you might be surprised to know that over the last few years, most of the major ski boot brands have redesigned their boot soles to allow you to use our cants. Both these pair of boots have been canted. It's a little easier to see what's going on this older pair. See the black cant wedge there sandwiched between the shell and the blue tread pad. And here's what the heel cant looks like. So you might be thinking at this point, this is a pretty radical modification to make to a pair of ski boots. Why would anybody do this? Well, that's what the rest of this video is about. We're going to take a deep dive into the reasons for canting and how cants, or the lack of them, impact your skiing. Canting is all about how you stand. More precisely, it's about how your body distributes your weight laterally across the soles of your feet. When you stand naturally with your feet comfortably apart and your knees slightly bent, your body weight should be distributed evenly across the balls of your feet, like this. You'll normally have some of your weight on your heels, but the majority should be spread evenly across the soles of both feet. Boot fitters refer to how you stand as your stance, and they have tools to evaluate your stance precisely. When someone stands perfectly like this, we call them flat. They stand flat, or they have a flat stance. Unfortunately, a lot of us don't stand flat. Some of us stand with more of our body weight carried on the outside of each foot, or the opposite, with our weight toward the inside of each foot. This tape is just suggestive. We can't really apply labels like bow-legged or knock-kneed. It's more complex than that. It's just how all the joints and bones in our hips and legs line up. Our personal physiology below the waist determines how we stand. We're all unique, and some of us are lucky enough to be flat. And we're not necessarily symmetrical. You might weight the right foot to the outside but be perfectly flat on the left, or weight the inside of one foot and not so much on the other. Your weight distribution is not really a problem when you're walking around. It's not a big deal unless you're a skier. Okay, so here's where the rubber meets the road, or rather where your stance meets a soft surface. I'm going to use some foam rubber here to make my point. If your stance puts more of your weight to the outside, your feet will tip out. And just the opposite. If you stand with your weight to the inside, your feet will tip in. It doesn't matter if you got a ski boot on or not, or skis on or not. If your weight is to the inside, your ski or your boot are going to be tipped inside. These tipped angles are relatively tiny, usually less than 3 degrees, but being less than perfect is a handicap when you ski. It's a big deal, especially with our modern skis. Now let's look in detail at how stance problems mess up your skiing and prevent you from getting better. Okay, I told you at the get-go that you've probably never seen this before. See, I got these model skis. They're pretty much to scale. I got tired of trying to make them look good and just cover the tops with, you guessed it, painter's tape. These little skis have side cut and camber, and yeah, they're a little janky, but I think we can learn a lot from them. Skis are designed to turn. That's what they do. On your first day on skis, you learn to press on an edge. The ski does its thing, forms an arc, and takes you in that direction. I don't want to get off in the weeds about how to ski, how to initiate turns, and so forth. My only point is that skis are designed to take input from you, and the turn signal you send to the ski is edge pressure. When you stand flat on your skis, they go straight. But if you have a stance problem and you're not flat, in your normal natural stance, your feet will tip, which presses on the edges, and the skis do their turning thing. When you were first learning to ski, you figured this out pretty quick and learned how to compensate. Beginners with stance problems are easy to see. They're the guys and gals that can't relax. If they stand in their neutral, natural stance, the skis will take off. Congratulations, you're watching this video, so you learned to ski and obviously you got past this. You learned to compensate for your handicap, but that was the easy part. Let's dive into how your stance problem impacts your skiing today. Okay, we've got our skis on, we're up on the mountain, and our model's gotten a bit more complex. These white posts I've attached to the skis represent lower legs and boots and bindings. Their lengths are to scale relative to the ski length, So when I put my fingers on the top, that's about where your knee would be. While the foam rubber was sort of a simulation of snow, here we only care about the surface as it represents a plane that we're traveling over. From here on, we want to compare the angle of attack of the ski to the plane as we look at how your stance impacts your skiing. Okay, let's set a baseline for the comparisons we're about to look at. A flat skier's legs can be nearly parallel, providing room to move independently and track independently. They can adjust their edges with lower body movements that are more or less equal. And there's ample room to apply extreme edge angles when necessary. They control themselves with nice, relatively symmetric movements back and forth. And the parallel leg positions allow maximum balance and neutrality to deal with whatever terrain they encounter. Okay, we're going to get tricky here. I've cut the ends of these legs at 88 degrees instead of 90 degrees. So when we mount the legs on the skis are going to be tipped 2 degrees. Now we have a way to look at the stance problems we've been talking about. I can show someone whose weight is to the inside is here, and then simply by flipping the legs around we can talk about the stance problem with the weights to the outside. I know that 2 degrees is barely visible in the camera angles, but we can understand that's what's going on. 2 degrees is near the middle of the distribution curve for folks who don't stand flat. You can think of it as a medium-large as a stance problem. We can't look at anything less or it's really hard to see it on camera. Okay, let's look at the stance problem where the weight is to the outside first. So this is a natural traverse stance for that person. And we'll look at the downhill ski first. As I tip the leg vertical, you can see the ski is still tipped slightly downhill. Because of the stance problem, weight is naturally tending toward the downhill edge of the downhill ski. To counteract this, the skier has learned to move their downhill knee to the inside to get onto the same degree of edge pressure that a flat skier has naturally. And if they don't get right on it as they finish a turn, the tail of their downhill ski washes out. And as the tail washes out, they overturn. And following their skis, their hips and shoulders can rotate a bit too far off the fall line, making matters worse. Now this problem might only exist on one side. Maybe one foot is naturally flat, so they tend to lose the tails on that other side. Outside stance skiers just naturally have a hard time finishing onto a strong inside edge. Let's bring the uphill ski back into the picture. With an outside stance, the uphill edge of the uphill ski is naturally weighted too much. If left unattended toward the end of a turn, the ski will overturn into the hill, reinforcing the tendency for the skier to overturn. So to compensate, the uphill knee must always move a bit downhill to take some of the weight off that uphill edge of the uphill ski. Micro adjustments throughout the turn are required to prevent the inside ski from finishing the turn too early. Once we arrive at a traverse, the uphill knee may need to come further downhill to release the uphill edge to side slip or skid or steer the traverse. So the bottom line is that the two knees must always move in opposite directions to compensate for the stance problem, and then move synchronously from these new positions to make the movements necessary to control the skis. The result of not being naturally flat is overly complex knee movements, and this stance problem can be the cause of what instructors refer to as A-frame. You see a lot of it on the hill, the downhill knee tucked into or behind the uphill knee, and the uphill knee tipped downward a bit, kind of a knock-kneed profile. Another form of compensation is to spread the feet wider, and in doing so the skier is attempting to adjust their stance geometry to move more weight from the outside to the inside. Now let's take a look at the other side of the coin, a stance that puts too much weight on the inside of the feet. The skier with this stance problem has overly strong inside edges. So here we have the opposite of the previous problem. The compensation movements are to move the knees apart and then synchronous movements from those positions to control the skis. If not constantly compensated for, the uphill ski may tend to drift closer. Alternatively, the skier may ski naturally then with their skis closer together, boots even banging, with their knees slightly apart. So once again, instead of the nice, economical, and easy knee movements of a flat skier, we have constant compensating adjustments just to maintain balance and control applied on top of the actual left and right control movements necessary to execute traverses and turns. So not only are the knee movements more complex, but the resulting leg positions are less than optimal. All right, we've looked now at both inside and outside stance problems. Now let's look at how a simple plastic wedge can correct these problems. I'm going to use this Solomon boot lower shell here, which I have added an angle indicator to, and a teeter-totter like device. And this is not unlike the devices the boot fitters use to test your, or to evaluate your stance. It acts to let your foot float laterally to that point of equilibrium where your natural stance and the weight that you put on your foot balances laterally. And I've got a bubble level here on that to help us see when it's level. So this teeter-totter represents your ski. And when I put the boot on the teeter-totter, I can tip it. And as we see, if we come over here, we've been using 2 degrees, so we'll stay with 2 degrees. When I bring the boot to 2 degrees with the weight to the outside, so I'm tipped out, we can see the ski is definitely not level. So to correct that, I'm going to bring into play a Cant wedge, a little piece of plastic here, set it on the ski, and now when I bring the boot back to 2 degrees, we see that the ski is now level. So what's happening here is the skier is still standing in their natural stance with their weight to the outside, but we've leveled the ski so they can be comfortable and relax and move their legs independently and enjoy the benefits of a flat skier. But the ski now underneath them is flat, and they can make symmetric knee movements to control the ski. We get rid of all those compensating movements that I've spent the last few minutes showing you. And that's how cants work. You can have a stance problem, these little wedges make you flat. Your skis are flat, so your leg movements can be like those of a flat skier. And your leg positions are, for you, neutral and balanced. I can't stress enough how the extraneous ski control movements we've looked at contribute to keeping you from being a better skier. You make extra knee movements and your legs end up in compromised and inefficient positions. The role of the ski boot is broader than most people realize. Clearly it must fit, that is, conform to your foot, and its stiffness and flex characteristics allow you to control your skis, but it must also conform your stance to the sport of skiing. In that way, it's an adapter. Boots are the user interface to your skis. If you're missing the stance adapter part of that interface, you're missing out on the high degree of control and optimal leg positions necessary to become a truly expert skier. You can bet all elite and World Cup ski racers have their stance totally dialed, and you should too. I want to return to the installed cants to discuss a detail you should know about. All the dimensions of these flat and curved surfaces of both the toes and the heels on alpine boots conform to an international standard. And this standard is honored by all the boot manufacturers, all the binding manufacturers, and it's what allows all boots to fit with all bindings and work properly. So whenever we cant a boot, no matter whether it's using our kind of cants that go within the layers of the boot sole, or canted lifters, or planing the boot sole, no matter which method you use, you're making one side of that boot sole thicker. And to get it back within the standard height dimension, the boot fitter must plane off the material. And you can tell a boot sole that's been canted by these scars on the shell. And that's necessary to get that boot to, once again, work with all bindings. Now this planing process requires a power tool, and it's noisy and it's messy, but it's also risky in that if the boot fitter slips or messes up, takes too much material off, they've pretty much trashed the boot. It goes in the dumpster. So for that reason, a lot of shops don't really like to do this or won't even do it. So just be aware of that when you're out there looking for shops to work with. Thankfully, there are a lot of full-service ski shops and boot fitters that are committed to providing canting services, and they have the skills and the knowledge and the confidence to do this process right, and they'll help you get the most performance from your equipment. Just be aware of this when you're looking for shop to work with you. Okay, where do you go from here? If you suspect that you have a stance problem, grab your boots and go see a good boot fitter. There's a long list of ski shops and pro boot fitters on our website that do stance evaluation and canting. The great news is that correcting a stance problem is easy, and there's not a quicker way to take your skiing to the next level. If you don't have a perfectly flat stance, it's a handicap. You'll forever be compensating for your stance, and your ability to improve will always be compromised. Buying the best skis and the best boots that money can buy won't fix you, and the best ski instructors can't fix you. Your stance problem is not a big deal. The big deal is just being aware of it. Just have your stance evaluated and get your boots canted if it turns out you need it. Also, when you tell a boot fitter that you want to have your stance checked, don't be surprised if they want to go back and check your overall ski boot fit. Changes the boot fit, cuff adjustments, footbeds, etc. all needs to happen before you worry about your stance. It's kind of like waxing your car. You'd always want to wash it first, otherwise you're just going to make a mess. Same thing with ski boots. Ski boots should fit perfectly before any stance correction. If you have questions, leave them in the comments, and be sure to hit the subscribe button to hear about new videos from Cantology. Our next video will look at stance problems up on the snow. No more painter's tape. And be safe out there, and I hope to see you up on the mountain. Thanks for watching.